You know King Arthur, the swords, the knights, the round table? Beautiful story, deeply British. But here's the thing no one tells you. King Arthur was one of the earliest victims of British propaganda. And Freemasonry, not a conspiracy, a real, historical, hierarchical, elite culture. They played a huge role in the rebrand. Freemasonry is not a conspiracy. It is the world's oldest private men's club. It started as a medieval trade guild for stonemasons, the workers who built the castles and the cathedrals. But by the 1700s, it wasn't about stone anymore. It was about networking power. The original Old Boys network, landowners, royals, military generals, judges, politicians, met behind closed doors, had mutual trust between them, protected each other, and produced propaganda to control the workers. Myth is political technology. The first Grand Lodge of Freemasonry was founded in London in 1717. Arthur was a Celtic folk war hero, a guerrilla war leader fighting off Saxon invasion in 500 CE. But 600 years later, Norman elites were rewriting British identity. They needed unifying myths about loyalty, chivalry, brotherhood, and Christian kingship. Arthur was perfect. So in 1485, Thomas Malroy published Le Morte d'Arthur. This book was sponsored by aristocrats. It was published during the War of the Roses. Its purpose was to unify under monarchy. The Freemasons loved Arthur. The Round Table, perfect metaphor for lodge culture. Equal brothers in service to a master. The myth promotes ritual, merit, loyalty, secrecy, all values the Freemasons readily embrace. York Rite Masonic orders in the 17 and 1800s would host Arthurian-themed rituals. They had entire Masonic rites called Orders of the Round Table, Knights of the Sword, Knights of the Grail. Victorian Britain supercharged this myth. Many of them, Freemasons, industrialized Arthur. Victorian Masons wrote whole books claiming that Arthur had founded the Freemasons. It was total fantasy, but it was super influential in British culture. Freemasonry positioned Arthur as like a British Jesus, sacrificed for the nation, awaiting return, power myth. King Arthur became a key figure in elite British mythology. He was used as colonial justification, completely whitewashing Celtic heritage. Freemasonry in the 1800s used King Arthur the same way modern politicians use Churchill memes. Not because it's true, but because it works. The Round Table is probably the most important piece of the Arthurian myth because it teaches a specific political idea. Hierarchy disguised as equality. Look, everyone is equal here. Not really. The table is round so that there's no head of the table and everybody sat equally spaced. But they were still sworn to Arthur, a king. Elites in medieval Europe were terrified of rebellion. Peasants outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. So they created myths like the Round Table that promote loyalty through a shared identity. They invented meritocracy, rise by virtue, not through birth, hiding the fact that power is still centralized within this room, around this king. You can join the Round Table if you're worthy. That incentivizes your obedience and service to the empire. All knights are equal here. That prevents the internal revolt between the nobles themselves. Arthur leads with wisdom, not fear. British condescension justifies the monarch without force. This is psychological warfare. This is class warfare. Very, very old imperial propaganda. The Round Table neutralizes any ambitious warlords by binding them to Arthur's moral code. It ritualized masculinity through control, quests, jewels, monsters, and it reframed loyalty as glory. Exactly like the Freemasons went on to do through their rituals and their ranks and their symbols of the British Empire. King Arthur was not just a king, he was the ideal king. His knights are not just soldiers, they're chosen brothers. And the adventures, that's not conquest. That's moral testing. This allows them to reframe violence, conquest, and secret loyalty as spiritually good and righteous. Freemasons didn't create King Arthur, but they understood him. They knew the power of his story, and that power should not be with the poor. That should belong to the throne.